Welcome to Inside Scoop Live, the podcast where indie authors get personal, sharing insights about their books, their writing journeys, and their passions. I'm your host, Sherry Hoyt, and I invite you to join me for engaging conversations with both debut indie authors and seasoned veterans. Whether you're looking for your next great read or a bit of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Aspen Thomas joins the show today to talk about his debut book, This Is Me, a story about coming home, honoring legacy, and finding the courage to live authentically. It's a heartfelt exploration of identity, belonging, and the quiet strength it takes to be yourself. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the author. Aspen Thomas grew up in the small town of Gulgawi, where wide open spaces and close community life fueled his early imagination. A lifelong tennis player and dedicated science and math teacher, Aspen draws inspiration from both the court and the classroom. His debut novel, This Is Me, was written during the COVID lockdown and reflects his experience growing up gay and autistic with ADHD in a rural community. It's a fictional story, but deeply personal, born from a love of storytelling and a drive to champion authenticity and representation. You can learn more about Aspen Thomas and his work at aspenthomas-writes.com. Well, hi, Aspen. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What is This Is Me about, and what was your inspiration behind the story?
This Is Me follows the story of Luke Corbett. He's a young man in his mid to late 30s. He's just moved back to his hometown. He's trying to find himself again, and he figured that moving back would be a good place to start. And along the way, he discovers, prejudices, mainly based around his homosexuality. And the book essentially is about him fighting through those prejudices and coming out the other side. Not necessarily unscathed, but fighting the traditions of a rural town, especially in Australia, and making connections along the way as well. My inspiration realistically is my own life. It's not a true story, but there's a lot of it that is based on sections of my own life. I myself am gay, and funnily enough, 2 years after I came up with this story, I actually did end up moving back to my hometown. It was only for a short while in the end. It was meant to be for a lot longer, but it was a story about finding yourself. And I guess a lot of times in my life, I've felt a little bit lost and wanting to start again.
So what made you want to sit down and write this story? Did you set out to write a novel, or did it kind of just come to you? How did that all come about?
It was a bit of both, really. I've always wanted to write. Obviously, I've never published anything before. This is my first book. But I guess in the isolation of COVID, it just made me think about, the connections between people and what might have happened if you actually kind of lost those connections. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I had a couple of stints where I had to isolate myself, and I wasn't allowed to leave my 2-bedroom apartment, and it sent me absolutely crazy.
Yeah. I mean, COVID was horrible, not to minimize that at all, but from it came so many inspiring books, People had time to slow down and think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently went to the Sydney Writers' Festival, and that was the main theme that I got out of all the authors that I saw. A lot of their books actually came out of COVID, and I think it just one of those once in a lifetime things that just makes you look at your life and find what's important to you. So
yeah. So what about Luke? What's weighing on him when he returns home?
When he returns home, he is just trying to find his way in the world, wants to know his place, doesn't really have that much of an idea, but then, he's got his grandfather's legacy to think about, his tennis, and how that all kind of comes into it. And then Josh's return also complicates things because he's held, feelings for him for, 25 plus years. And, things about that, whether Josh actually feels the same, what would happen if they did actually get together. He does have a lot on his mind, and a lot of anxiety comes through from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's his hometown, so it holds, comfort, but there's also that pressure of, being authentic. Why was it important to set his story in a place so tied to his family legacy?
I guess I found it was easier to write about the extremes. Like, there's family legacy, there's country tradition, and then, on the other hand, there's his authentic self. You know, he's gay, living in a small town. And while it's not necessarily evident right from the start, those two ideas are kind of playing off against each other. And I find, like, in a city, you have the same things, but I feel like they're a little bit more similar, especially living here in Canberra. Like, we do have homophobia, transphobia, racism, things like that, but it's on a much smaller scale than it would be like in a country setting, especially when he's got so many family ties, family connections, reputation to live up to, and just kind of
Right.
those mountains to climb, really.
I think it is harder in a small town. I mean, maybe just because everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
There's
Like,
no room for anonymity or, or privacy sometimes,
like when I grew up in Gulgawi, I knew my teachers personally. It's not like here, like I don't know my students on a personal level. I might see them at the shops every now and then, but it's not like I'm hanging out with them or their parents on the weekends, whereas that's what would happen back home, and like everyone does know everything, and it's very hard to keep a secret in those settings.
Tell us a little bit about Luke's connection to his grandfather. What does that relationship represent, and how does it shape who Luke is?
Well, in a lot of ways, he idolizes Edward, and he wants to live up to the legacy that he thinks Edward has. Like, Edward's a tennis Grand Slam champion. He's done so many things. He came back to look after his family, took over the farm, was the mayor of the town. And in Luke's mind, he's done so many great things. And I think in comparison, a lot of the time, Luke feels like a failure because he hasn't necessarily done all those things. And the most important thing of all is that Luke actually just doesn't want to disappoint him. And he feels like, well, especially at the beginning of the book, he feels like in a lot of ways, if he doesn't live a certain way, he will disappoint Edward. And regardless of whether that's true or not, it does help to shape his actions. Throughout the book, he starts to kind of live a little bit more authentically and realize that Edward's actually proud of him no matter what he does. Edward quite literally just wants Luke to be happy.
I love that because we're so hard on ourselves, and it's doubly hard to live up to this legend that you idolize. Huh.
Yeah.
I was wondering why tennis, but it sounds like tennis is near and dear to your heart. Tell us a little bit about what made the tennis story the right symbol for, performance and tradition and actually belonging.
Well, I guess in respect to that, any sport would have worked, but tennis is, well, it's what I know, and I know it quite well. I could give a TED talk on the Grand Slams, and I guess in a lot of ways it was something easy for me to talk about and easy for me to slip into the story without having to go too far out of my natural knowledge zone to actually make it sound authentic.
Well, that's one of the rules, right? Unwritten rules, write what you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So community plays a powerful role in the story, both in its acceptance and its resistance. What drew you to explore the tension between that support and rejection?
So I guess with looking at the tension between support and rejection, it's a tightrope that we kind of walk on. And I feel like they're two sides of the same coin. And, we're always looking for support for our true selves. But at the same time, we're also afraid of being rejected because we're actually trying to seek that support. And I just felt like they actually gave me, I guess, good imagery to actually portray, especially in this story.
Yeah. Did it shift your own view of what belonging means as the story unfolded?
Yeah, I think it did, to be honest. And like even me writing this, I know it's a fictional story, but I do feel like just getting the words down on paper actually shifted what I believed I needed to belong. And I guess realizing that, you draw on support of your friends, then, you kind of learn to let go of a lot of the things that you're actually afraid of being rejected by. And I guess being able to fight through that and actually live the way that you would like to live.
Yeah. Luke has some steady allies, companions, friends in his life. What do those friendships tell us about our chosen family?
I guess that, well, sometimes our biological family suck. Like,
Yeah. Well
Luke's
said.
family is actually quite supportive, but something that I dipped a toe in the water, so to speak, with Tim is that he didn't have that support and how that kind of, I guess, changes things. And I guess with chosen family, we always need people who are going to have our backs no matter what. And sometimes our biological families just don't live up to that.
Yeah.
And
And sometimes they can't, you know?
yeah. And even sometimes they shouldn't. Like, it's just
Right.
one of those things. It's like you can't choose your family. Well, actually you can, but you can't choose which family you're born into.
Right.
And you've just got to find those people who are going to have your backs.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of Luke's biggest shifts happen in the quiet moments. Why did you center his transformation in those more intimate spaces?
Because that's where I feel that most transformation actually takes place. Yes, we do have the big moments in our life, but the transformation actually takes place when we reflect on those big moments. And that can only happen between them. And the big moments do happen to Luke. He kind of thinks about them and he's like, works out what information he needs out of that situation to progress.
Yeah. There's a love scene that's striking for its emotional honesty. What did you hope to capture in that moment of connection?
Just how much Luke and Josh actually do care for each other. Yes, the location of the scene coming just after Edward's wake might tend to lead to like emotions running high and characters acting a little bit out of character.
Mm.
But it was just that point of emotional rawness that both of them could actually turn to the same page and be on the same page. And that's actually one of the reasons why I didn't go along the lines of so many other books, which is they get together in these emotional moments and then something happens and they kind of drift apart. So I wanted them, once they got together, they were together. And I guess just that emotional honesty and both of them being able to admit their feelings to each other as well as to themselves.
Yeah. I like that because a lot of times, you're reading and the characters come together and you're like, oh, good. I'm so glad, And then, like you said, something happens and they're not together anymore. And it's just like, oh, come on. Yeah, it drives the story, but I guess I'm a romantic, but I just.
Yeah, and I always hate it when, in a book or a movie, like the two characters ship, they do get together and then the writer or the director, whoever puts a spanner in the works and then you're like, oh, well, that was heartbreaking.
Yeah. It's like, I get it. I know, I understand the why, but sometimes I just want to get straight to that happy ending.
Yeah.
So, between his grandfather's legacy and his role in the community, Luke faces specific expectations around masculinity. And how did those expectations shape or suppress who he is?
Well, on some level, Luke does care about masculinity, but that's not his main focus.
Mhm.
His main focus on that is actually just whether he's disappointing his grandfather and trying to navigate his way through the world and, live up to his grandfather's legacy, be accepted in the community in which he now lives. And I just don't quite think that that's his primary focus, with the masculinity. And so, where it's not what I tried to kind of get out of that, I guess.
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
or tell.
Maybe it's important for some people.
Yeah.
Just because of preconceived ideas, of what should be. But
yeah, and that's definitely true. And yeah, and we've all got preconceived ideas about what it means to be like real men. And, I've seen other movies and books do it absolutely perfectly. So,
yeah.
but yeah, it wasn't my primary goal. And kind of that characterization either.
Right, right. Tell us about Luke in the classroom. He goes beyond teaching and digs deeper into ideas about worldview. Why was it important to show him engaging with the next generation like that?
Well, I think the question kind of says that they are the next generation, like they're the future of the world. And what I was trying to show through Luke's teaching is getting the students to kind of open up their minds to think further about where the world is now, what they can kind of do to fit themselves into that world, and even how they may actually change it. And
Mhm.
and it's something that I myself try to do in my classroom, not necessarily telling them how they should be, but like getting them to kind of think about that. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's happening too. I mean, you can see it just in the younger generations. I feel like they're more accepting, they're
yeah,
more open. So it's happening. It's slow, but it's happening. And I love
like
that.
like I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, like back in the 90s, homosexuality was where transgenderism is now. Like even
Mm,
transgenderism is becoming more accepted, but there's still a lot of hate towards that, whereas there's a lot more acceptance towards homosexuality that wasn't
right.
present like in the 90s and before. And so, like, as it becomes more accepted and we start talking about it more, then it becomes more of the, I guess, the social standard.
Yeah. It's encouraging.
Yes.
What do you think Luke learns from his students that he couldn't learn anywhere else?
Well, I guess in my mind, students they kind of have a different way of thinking about things. Like, as we grow up and become adults, our thinking patterns kind of get a little bit set, whereas students, especially, well, early to mid teenagers, they've still got a bit of that elasticity in their brains, but with enough conscious thought about the world to be able to kind of think about it a little bit more creatively and to give a different perspective on what Luke might be going through. Like, Luke's an adult, he's, 36. Even he thinks about things a certain way, despite the fact that he's got a relatively open mind. But then his
Mm,
students kind of might come at it from a different point of view. And that can actually allow Luke to expand his mind a little bit further than he would without them.
yeah. The town of Gamarra feels like a character in its own right. What did you want readers to feel about this setting, especially those who've never been to a place quite like it?
Well, I guess I wanted them to feel like they were there. And while the name itself doesn't really come into the plot until the very end, like Luke actually tells readers and the people of Gamarra what Gamarra actually means, and it means to awaken.
Mm,
And so I wanted readers to immerse themselves in this world as a way of actually awakening themselves and seeing things in a new light, I guess.
yeah. And talking about the setting a little bit, I just wanted to throw in a plug for your cover because I love it. It's beautiful.
Mm.
And did you have a hand in that or did Telwell take that?
Telwell took it, so I gave some things that I wanted, and so the idea of having so on the cover there's Luke and Josh as kids, and then behind them the silhouettes or a white silhouette of them as adults, and then the background I wanted just a bit of representation, and yes, the river is actually in there, and that is the Warrigal River, and I just wanted it to feel from the very start that it was set in rural Australia, and the river does become one of the main settings as well.
I love it. I love the layers. They say don't judge a book by its cover, but we all do it. And
Yeah,
it's your first impression. And I love how all those layers come together.
yeah. So do I actually, and it came out even better than what I expected it to.
Oh, good. Good. That's a bonus.
Yeah.
I'm interested in learning what kind of feedback you've had from readers so far. And was any of the feedback surprising to you?
No surprising feedback. Generally, it's been positive, and the negatives that I've kind of come across, there have been things that I did kind of know, and that's feedback that I can take on for next time. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. So the general feedback has been positive.
Yeah.
Good, good. That's
Yeah.
important to take into consideration all the feedback you get, especially with your debut novel. I mean, the hard part's done. You wrote your first novel.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I say the hard part's done, though. A lot of people think the writing is the easiest part and the marketing's the hardest part, but that's a
True.
whole nother thing. But what has the experience been like for you, the whole debut journey?
Well, I guess in parts it was slow, but then, it got to the end and the book was kind of released before I even realized that it was, to be honest. And it was a whirlwind, but
Mm.
it was actually a good experience. And obviously, Tellwell's, has a marketing plan for me and is helping me out that way. But a lot of that I've got to do myself. But the way
Right.
that they're actually set up, it actually helped me to actually just get, I guess, my foot in the world of being a published author. It's
Yeah.
helped me realize one thing off my bucket list, which is to publish a novel. And I do have to say that I'm not done there. So I would like to publish some more or write some more. I've got to write them first.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed the cover said book one. So can you tell us about ideas you have for what's next, or have you started another book? What is next for you?
Yes, I have actually officially started writing the sequel. I've planned this as a trilogy. So the first book is This Is Me. The second book is This Is Us. And then the third book is This Is Where We Belong. And I guess not to give things away too much, there will be a little bit of heartbreak in the third book.
Mm.
Actually, there'll be a little bit of heartbreak, but in a different way in the second book, mainly because the antagonist of that book is actually something that, well, even you would know it. Like Australia, we get a lot of bushfires, and so that kind of threatens it.
Mm.
And it does start to show splinters in Luke and Josh's relationship, but also how they kind of fix them as well. And it'll delve a little bit further into Josie's personal life and things that she's going through. And then right at the end, there'll be some happy endings.
Well, it sounds like you have some work to do. So,
Yes, I do.
yeah, well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I guess before we close, what kind of conversations do you hope this book starts for readers, families, or communities?
I guess I hope that it starts people thinking on, whether traditions actually fully matter. Like, there are some traditions that obviously do matter, but like, is it that important, I guess, to hold old-fashioned ideas at the expense of someone that you may actually care about? And so while at the end of this book, like, by no means does all of Gamarra accept homosexuality, I do believe that Luke has changed at least some minds, and so he actually becomes more embraced by the community than actually just tolerated. And I guess conversations around tolerance as well. It's like, do we just, I guess, tolerate things because society tells us we have to, or do we actually want to go further and actually embrace these ideas?
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Change happens when people take that bold step,
Yeah.
I guess, Well,
Yeah.
Aspen, is there anything else you wanted to add today?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it. I guess I just hope that it reaches the people that actually need it the most. Like, I think it should give hope to a lot of people, especially given that it's Pride Month and there are some people who can't openly celebrate Pride because their families or their communities may not be as accepting as they need them to be. And I guess I just would like this book to be a little glimmer of hope
Right.
in a dark world.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing a little bit about yourself and your work. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Sherry. I've enjoyed our conversation too.
Thank you so much for joining me today for my interview with Aspen Thomas, author of This Is Me. You can learn more about Aspen Thomas and his work at aspenthomas-writes.com. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.